Hey guys, working away today on the fuel sender unit, kind of going to the poll that I posted yesterday to see where everybody's needle is at when your tank is full. So mine was always right at the 3/4 mark. So I've been working on it today and I've got mine dialed in. So it's right dead in the middle of the full dot. So I'll show you what I did in order to do that. I first tested the resistance of my fuel sending unit at the tank. It just happened to be I have about a half a tank or about a third of a tank, so my fuel sending unit was reading 25.0 ohms. And then what I did was I took the wire off of the back of the gauge, measured it. It was reading 26.5 ohms. So that tells me that the wire between the gauge and the sending unit is adding 1.5 ohms of resistance. So then what I did was I know that a full fuel sending unit is 10 ohms. So that would mean that in a best case scenario, my gauge, a best case scenario with my fuel tank all the way full, my gauge should see 11.5 ohms. So what I did was I set up a rheostat. It's a 5K rheostat with a 100 ohm resistor in parallel. That way I can really dial in my resistance, set it to 11.5 ohms because I know that is going to be what a best case scenario is. Hooked it up to the back of the gauge, so the gauge is actually only reading the resistance off of the rheostat. It's no longer reading it off of the factory harness and fuel sending unit. So that way I can pass through what a perfect signal would actually be. And then what I did is I've replaced I posted this a while ago, but I'll put a link to that in the description. I took my variable voltage, regulator, my buck converter, which is this little guy right here. What I did was I slowly brought the voltage up. Your ICVR is supposed to be putting out around 5 volts. I found that in order to get my oil pressure and temperature gauges to read correctly, my ICVR actually had to be down around 4.6, but then it was making my fuel gauge even less accurate. So I'm going to take the opposite approach of raising my voltage up a little tiny bit. So my voltage is now around 5.5 volts instead of 4.5 volts. By bringing my voltage up, that brings my fuel gauge up. So now all I have to do is I can hook my regular sending unit wire back up to my fuel gauge because now I know my fuel gauge is perfect. And then I will add a variable resistor to the voltage supply wire that provides the power to the oil and the temperature gauges when the engine is running at ideal situations, and I can just pull those voltages down to get the oil pressure and engine temperature, kind of where I feel they should be. There's not really